As far as board construction goes, Slingshot's been on top of the game since the very beginning, with handcrafted boards in the USA, clever shapes, and a lineup that crosses over and caters to every style of riding. It can be a bit confusing deciding what board is right for you, so this week we're going to talk about the Slingshot Refraction versus Slingshot Asylum. Both of these boards look like wake-style boards, and to a fault, that is true. That said, there are quite a few differences between these boards, and I'd like to go over that today. To stay consistent, I'll be breaking board videos down into 6 points to consider: construction shape and rider type, upwind ability, chop and waves, pop, playfulness, and unique points of interest. So let's start with construction. So with Slingshot, like I said, these are handcrafted boards made in the USA with a wood core, and then they're fiberglassed over and a pneumatic press. And what that makes for is a more damp feeling board, reactive but not the most reactive. And Slingshot, if you've ever ridden a Slingshot board, they have a really unique feel that's kind of hard to articulate. And if you've ever ridden one, you know what I'm talking about. So the main difference between these two boards is that the Refraction is more catered towards wake-style riders. So what you're going to get is a board that has a looser feel, more durable. If you're the kind of rider that likes to hit kickers or sliders, or most people, most likely, you just like to ride up on the beach or you ride places with rocks, this is the board that you're going to want to consider if you're a rougher on your gear or you're looking for that particular feel. And conversely, the Asylum, it's a bit more of a freestyle board. It does cross over into some free ride applications, but what you're going to get is a faster, more high-performance, freestyle-minded board. So moving on to the finer points, let's talk about upwind ability. Now between these two, the Asylum is hands down the better contender for riding upwind. And if you look at the shape of these boards, it just makes sense. The Asylum, it's a flatter board, it has channels, so it's a bit more grippy, and it's just going to rock you upwind. So moving on, let's talk about how well they perform in the chop and the waves. So again, with the Asylum, it's going to pop better in the chop, but that said, the Refraction, it will actually perform better in the chop and the waves. And what I mean by this is because it's a looser, more buttery feel, it's just going to soften those impacts on your knees, it's going to soften the landing, it's going to be more playful. So, regarding the chops and the waves, what you're going to get out of the Asylum is a board that still pops better, but you're going to feel everything. The Refraction, on the other hand, it's going to just be a much better feeling board in those rougher conditions. So that is another thing to consider. If you ride somewhere where it happens to be choppier more often than not, you might want to consider going for a more rockered board. And I often do that myself during the fall here when we get those choppier days and the seas just get really rough. I just prefer to have a softer ride on my body. And between these two, it just comes down to what you're looking for in these conditions. Taking the Refraction out in the waves, it's certainly not a wave board, but it's going to be fun. It's going to have a looser, more fun feel in the waves. So to sum up the chop and the waves, you're going to get more efficacy out of the Asylum when you're in those choppier conditions, but you're going to have a more fun ride, an easier ride, a softer ride with the Refraction, and probably a bit more stylish as well when you're out there on the water, just with its faster turning, more buttery type feel. Whereas the Asylum's a little more locked in, kind of a tracking type feeling board. You might recall me talking about how often the flatter the board, the more pop you're going to get. And while this is true, there are a lot of other variables, from the stiffness of the board, the way that it releases off the water, or the concave comes into play. And in between these two, actually, the Asylum does pop better as well. So like I said, it is more that freestyle-minded board. And I would say that the Refraction's not that far behind in pop. And the biggest difference here would most likely be that, if you rely on popping with board speed, you're going to have an easier time with the Asylum. If you like to pop a bit more with the kite power, if you're that rider that likes to ride really powered, it's probably a bit easier to control your kite when you're really powered up with the Refraction. And as well, with speaking with Tucker, he mentioned that he finds it a bit easier to slack his kites when he's riding boards like the Refraction. So that is something to consider as well, is you're going to get a bit more control out of the Refraction, but for just pure performance, whether you're a bit more of a novice or you just want that ultimate pop and slack, the Asylum is going to deliver. But if you're a more experienced rider, you might actually prefer riding the Refraction for that control. So to sum up the pop, they both have great pop. They're both stiffer boards. They both have a great release. They're really made for that rider who is looking for a board that's going to have high performance and pop well. but I do think there is a small advantage to the Asylum, especially if you're a more novice rider relying on board speed. So something else to consider when you're looking at kiteboards is how playful they are. And again, a lot of this just has to do with the shape and the outline of the board. So with the Refraction, what you're going to get is a more playful board, a more buttery feeling board. It's going to turn a bit faster, have a more loose feel. And if you look at the bottom of both of these boards, you can see that the Asylum, it has more channels, and there are channels actually on the Refraction as well. And so it's not going to be the loosest board out there, but it's definitely not going to have that locked-in feel in the Asylum. And what this just makes for is, more forgiving landings. You don't have to land as precise with a more playful board like this. And as far as playfulness goes, this is actually a pretty subjective thing. So some people prefer having a more locked-in feel, kind of like skateboarders. Some riders like to have that more locked-in feel with their trucks. Others like to have that real loose kind of feel on their board. And this is kind of the same idea here. Whether you like a more locked-in feel on the water or you want a more slippery, looser feel. In between these two, the Asylum, locked in, solid, Refraction a bit looser, more playful. And actually a fun factor that you can kind of mess with on your board is regarding playfulness would be the fins. So the bigger fins, the more locked in you're going to be, and the smaller fins, the less locked in you're going to be. So something that I like to do is I actually like to ride the Asylum with the smaller wake style fins. And this just loosens the board up a little bit, makes the landings a little more forgiving, and just makes a different feel on the water. So it's important to remember, the bigger the fins, the easier it is to go upwind, and the more pop you're going to get. The smaller the fins, it takes away some of that efficiency when you're riding upwind, but it does make for a more playful feel. So mess around with that a little bit and just do some experimentation and figure out what works for you. So the last point that I wanted to talk about regarding boards is just some unique points of interest or anything else that stands out on the boards. And with these two coming from the same manufacturer, they're pretty similar regarding construction and all of that. But what you're going to get out of the Refraction is a more durable base. So like I said, if you want to hit kickers or sliders, or if you ride up on rocky beaches, or you're just rough on your gear in general, you might want to consider this board. And as well, it's made to press a bit better. So there's just some design aspects with the tips and the tails that make it better for that. It's a very nice board for progression. You're that rider that loves to go wakeboarding or cablepboarding, but you also like kiteboarding, you're probably going to really like this board. And actually kind of a fun point here is we've actually taken the Refraction behind the boat. We've taken it to our local cable park, and it turns out that board actually performs great. So if you are somebody who practices all three sports, whether you like to wakeboard behind the boat, you like to go to the cable park, or you like to kiteboard, this board actually is one of the few boards out there that does it all pretty well. Not the best wakeboard out there, not the best cablepboard out there, but it's pretty solid. And coming back to the Asylum, it's a more well-rounded board. So whether you're a rider who's just looking for a performance freeride board, or you want a really high-performance freestyle board, this one's most likely going to be the ticket. It has a lot of advantages that make it a bit easier, just giving you an edge with getting upwind and popping. And those are probably the biggest trade-offs, I would say, between these two boards is, you have the advantage of upwind ability and pop with the Asylum, but then you have the more forgiving, softer landings and more playful feel of the Refraction. One's a little more niche, one's a little more well-rounded, but they're still both great choices for really actually just about anybody, with the exception of beginners. I might advocate that you avoid the Refraction unless you get a little more into that wake style side of riding. So the main takeaway here is that the Refraction, a little more niche, a little more wake style minded. It's going to work well for all three sports, super durable. Great for taking those impacts, and coming back to the Asylum, a bit more well-rounded tool. Rides upwind better, it pops a little better, probably a bit easier for those beginner riders out there. So it really just comes down to what you're looking for and what you want to get out of your ride. And hey, like always, this is an open forum, so I'd love to hear your feedback. If you're riding the Refraction or the Asylum or similar boards, let us know what your experience has been like. Let us know what you like about them, what you don't like about them, and just join the conversation. And hey guys, if you found this video helpful, please hit the thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe. And actually, there's a little bell right next to the subscribe button. If you hit that, you'll never miss another edit that we drop. And we're making a point to try to drop, at least 2 to 3 edits a week. So hopefully we'll get there soon where you guys are getting lots of great content regarding boards. So just keep letting us know what you'd like to see, and we'll keep, dropping these edits for you. And as well, if you're curious to learn more about the Slingshot lineup, I'm going to put a link in the description and a clickable link at the end of this video that will take you to the Slingshot board page on our site. So if you want to read more about each of the boards and kind of see where they stack up, give that a click and learn some more. And until next week, this has been Rygo, and I will see you on Wednesday.